love the way, going back to Jonathan, I just want to make sure we get as many questions in as we can. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think this will roughly follow what's been said, and you can probably perform some crazy synthesis and answer all of us simultaneously. My name's Phil. Thanks. Thank you very much. The talk was great, and I wanted to ask about I wanted to hear more about this position you put the philosopher in, or philosophy, because you kind of contrasted the abstract heavy-handedness of philosophy with the worldliness of the content of literature. But what I just heard sounded like philosophy.
Okay.
It sounded like the phenomenology of literary experience.
Okay.
And
it was, yeah.
Yeah, and and I love Merleau-Ponty as well, and I found great affinities with what you're saying and what he would say. So, but I guess the thing about what you're calling vulnerable thinking that we philosophers don't do is, and what you do, and what I saw as the vulnerability of your thinking, is this constant stepping back from the truth claims you're making into this sort of anecdotal digressions that call everything into question, or put your own identity on the table, and thus, make everything more ambiguous than I thought it was, which discomforts me. But so is that the vulnerability, and is that what philosophers don't do? I just wanted to hear a little more about what you're making philosophy out to be.
Yeah, I mean, these are great. Yeah. Let me. Please, Darren, hi.
My question.
Yeah, Jonathan. Yeah.
Question. So you say that on the one side that the value of the humanities lies in reading against the grain, or having the courage to read against the grain. That is, this value lies in its essence. And you kind of contrast that and say that we don't need to redefine the humanities or reshape the humanities for global techno-capitalism. So I want to question why you say that we don't need to redefine the humanities. But let me kind of So, because on the one side, a lot of what you're talking about, like this idea of well-roundedness and the critique of instrumental reason, and even the idea of reasonableness. It's a lot of what we can call modern bourgeois ideology. Right? So, for example, the well-roundedness, what it used to be called the production of gentlemen. And so I'm wondering whether this kind of, and the role of the humanities reading against the grain and doing this critique all the time, even remains within this kind of idea of the bourgeois ideology, right? Critique of instrumental reason. So it takes the terms that are from social reality, but critiques it. And so I'm wondering whether this kind of, well-roundedness, all these ideas, of the modern bourgeois ideology, are still applicable today. Because when we look at, say, the Brown Report in England and stuff like that, they're not really interested in creating well-rounded individuals, or if the word well-rounded individual.
Yeah, I was saying I was against the well-rounded.
Right. Yeah. But what I'm saying about the critique of well-roundedness is within the kind of idea that it's something is within the the bourgeois ideology, right? And what I'm kind of trying to point as that perhaps there's been a change in that bourgeois ideology. When one looks at the Brown Report, they're not interested in well-roundedness, but in the production of in the generation of human capital, which relates to giving people a set of skills rather than production of gentlemen, and to work in a very kind of loose liquid modernity. So I'm wondering whether, that if the humanities does not have to redefine itself in that kind of world, because it doesn't have an object to critique anymore, which is that bourgeois ideology, or the form, shape of its object has changed.
Great questions, yeah. Should I start responding, or, as I am, jump in? Yeah, begin to jump, you're absolutely right. I mean, in some sense, I have been, guilty of, either using a kind of a straw person. I'm aware that, some of the stuff that I'm thinking of could be Schrodinger's cat, could be, wave particle. There are things happening in science which clearly are compatible, and in some sense pushing it even beyond where the humanities are. So I think to that extent, the real question is, so when there is, the two responses to you, agree with you that exactly the kind of concern that my friend had. If you had someone like me talk about corporate capital, what the hell will I say? Will I end up not understanding it? So for me there the question is understanding as an insider, as an outsider. So what do those things mean? So if I say, okay, I know what you mean. For example, you could do Derrida, and then you do Gödel-Escherbach. And then you combine the two, and then you don't quite get it right. I mean, you think of, probability within whatever, but we end up making large metaphorical colonizations and say, aha, I understand your concept, but the mathematician says, but that is not what it means in my field. Whereas if you took that concept to your field, you think it's the aporia. But to me, it is not the aporia at all. It just means stepping it up, going to the next level. The first response is, conceptually, maybe there is an overall sense of a horizontal commonality. But the horizontal commonality immediately gets problematic when you work it out. So that is partly, so I'm completely with you when you say that there really are many more areas when there is common work taking place already. And then the question is, if it indeed is happening, so why is that not? We do it in a university all the time. We always say interdisciplinary. But most stuff isn't really that. We still remain where we are. We keep poaching. You remain who you are, and then you keep poaching. So does that make any sense? So clearly, I think, if there are those largest sympathies, why are they not coming to the fore? Is it because corporate capital is insisting on a certain mode of knowledge production? And to that extent, that is the common enemy. The corporate model, and then a whole bunch of us, whoever you are, empiricists, sociologists, whatever, all of us doing something called knowledge. So what is then at stake is, despite the differences as to what knowledge means in room A, in room B, in room C, and there are those differences, if in spite of that there is a broad conceptual, philosophic, undercurrent or whatever, then the question is, what is it that is in the nature of things right now, the production model, or make it simple, make it intelligible. So all I'm suggesting is, if you ask me who I am in my own work, I would call myself a post-humanist. So I'm not a humanist. The next answer then is, who am I talking to? The danger which I think I myself embody is when you have almost like saying I'm having an insider conversation and I'm going to say one thing over there, but then I'm seeing someone else, I'm going to become a little more reactive, I'm going to become a little more paranoid, I'm going a little more, the kind of thing which always happens, for example, when you chair a department and you say we need a person to hire. And you say something like, where would this person, what should be the home department for this person? Could an equal validation be in women's studies, Asian Am, English, anthropology? So one half of you says, I don't really care, because you really believe in knowledge is something de-territorialized. You don't really care where the person is. But when it comes to job count, who wants, then the logic of large department, small department. Okay, this person is doing, Chinese national. Should the person be in one department or another? And suddenly, multiple conversations are leading to happen simultaneously. On the one hand, I don't really care because truly this belongs in something called knowledge. But on the other hand, where should it fit in? You do numbers counting, you take into account unequal power structures. So all I'm suggesting is, so depending on where one is talking, doesn't really mean that you wear another hat and you contradict what is someplace else, but it does become important who you're addressing. And are you being reactive? Are you being paranoid? If you're being paranoid, is the paranoia justifiable? Is it pathological? Do you really feel like, oh my God, I feel beleaguered, I feel somehow embattled because I'm a certain kind of scholar? And if that is indeed the case, why is it happening? So there the answer is, it seems to me that there is a certain cacophony when what you have to say takes on the particular inflections of who you're talking to, and you feel like, okay, I'm talking to so-and-so, or I feel like I'm answering to a certain person, and then the answer changes, so there are some of those vagaries. So back to the question of, clearly, yeah, there is much more happening. Does it seem like a beginning of an answer? And then who do I move to? Let's see. The next question was, let's see. Yeah, the whole question of, I love what you said with anonymity. I mean, that example for me is really sort of, it's like, a conversation, we always panic. What do we talk about? For the conversation, oh my God. I mean, but I love what you said. That ideally, it could well be someone asking an astrophysicist, what do you do? Or a Wall Street banker, what do you do? The first issue is just the profession creates a nasty frisson. And suddenly, it's easier talking about, maybe it's not, how about them Mets? Should Anaheim, should we give the Sacramento Kings or not? Now that's equally polemical. You could go over, for example, I live here and I'm a die-hard Celtics fan. Oh, wow, problems. But I'm wondering, the moment you bring in profession, something happens. Correct me if I'm wrong. On the one hand, the profession is something that you keep at arm's length. It's only a job that you do, and it is. But it's not just a job that you do. In certain ways, maybe for some of us, maybe we think the job influences, is a doctor person more of a doctor in his personal life than, let's say, an engineer is an engineer in her life. But the profession brings, so you immediately say, oh God, what am I supposed to say? There's almost a kind of a double consciousness, a double accountability. On the one hand, it's almost like saying, how are you doing? And I begin saying, how I really am doing. Okay, what do you do? And okay, in the middle of a conversation, I tell them, I am, I got my PhD, and I do this, and I do this. And that isn't what you wanted. So there is an immediate sense of unease. Would you agree?